contact tracing smartphone apps were meant to protect our communities. So why won't we use them? Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, contact tracing isn't a new idea, is it? What people have called shoe leather epidemiology has been around, well, since about, I think, the 1850s it is.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's absolutely the desire to try and stamp these diseases out as soon as possible. So I think as soon as people learned about transmission, they tried to figure out ways to slow it down or stop it, sure.
But, however, apps to do contact tracing were considered essential during this pandemic. Why is that?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, I think that it transmitted so quickly that the traditional contact tracing quickly ran aground, and some countries really didn't have a tradition of it. Asia did a bit more because of the recent previous versions of these diseases, but a lot of the Western countries didn't have the tradition. And I think also some of it is practicality. This is the first pandemic and hopefully the last where we've had smartphones that have the technology to be able to do it.
In a perfect world, how would this digital contact tracing work?
Well, the way it works now is that with your Bluetooth on, it lets you know if you have the app, anyone else with the same app within 1.5 meters or 2 meters for more than 15 minutes, it exchanges IDs. Not names, just IDs. And then if one person is tested positive, they're given a code by the authorities. They put the code into the app. It checks the database and alerts anyone else who has been within the 15 minutes within 2 meters. It alerts them that they were in contact with someone who tested positive and that they should get themselves tested or self-isolate.
But of course, when you start talking about gathering IDs and checking against databases, it does worry people. How much personal information has to be gathered by one of these apps?
Well, I mean, the irony is in this case very, very little. It gives you an ID. The system, like in Switzerland and most countries, that's based on the Google, Apple technology is very privacy preserving. So it gives you an ID. It's fully decentralized. So it's just comparing IDs against each other. And when there's a match, it sends out a note. The authorities don't know who you are. They don't know where you are. They just will send updates to your app that tell you get tested, stay in isolation, and give other information. But they don't know where you were or who you were in contact with, and neither does the person who gets the alert. And that can actually lead to some challenges. I mean, you could argue that a better system would take more information. For instance, behind my wall is a neighbor that I never see, but if we sit having breakfast within 1.5 meters of each other and our phones register and he tests positive, it will send me an alert and I'll go through the whole testing, self-isolation. Had I known that it was A, that person, or B, that I was sitting here in my house, I would know that it was a false positive because the wall was always between us. So in some sense, it's so privacy preserving that it loses a little of its value. But that's the trade-off that was made. And that's a bit of the frustration why there's so many digital trust issues with this when it is so privacy preserving.
Yes, let's talk about that digital trust. I remember when they were thinking about rolling out an app in the UK, first of all, we were told that unless about 70% of the population were using the app, then it wouldn't have much effect. So how popular have these apps been?
Not very. That's true. I mean, we're learning a lot about different types of herd immunities, and there's a contact tracing immunity. We're going to be learning about the vaccine immunities. And in this case, in Switzerland, it's about 22%. I think the most in any country is in the 30 or 40%. So it really hasn't hit that level. In Switzerland today, there's about 200 alerts that go out per day. So it really hasn't hit a very high level.
Now, you characterize this in your writing as a failure of digital trust. What's behind this?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, we are in this techlash because we are starting to learn what the companies know about us, what's happening on social media around elections, So there is this general techlash where there's a little more uncertainty, a little less trust. We're starting to understand what we're trading off in return for these free services, and for many, they don't seem so free anymore. So there are some considerations. I think there's also a bit of distrust, frankly, in governments, that they might know your location, they might force you to quarantine. They might find out who you're in contact with. And the great irony in this case is that they've really gone overboard to make sure none of that does happen. But it's hard to educate people and convince them that that's the case.
Yes, in Europe, for example, and in the UK, we already have GDPR as a way to protect our privacy. If that's not working to inspire trust, is there anything more that governments can do?
Well, I think some of the distrust is not coming necessarily from privacy. It's coming from the social media messages and other things that we're getting, and it just kind of all gets mixed together. But there's also just clearly a case of education, that understanding what GDPR protections provide, understanding the benefits and the potential risks, which are very low in this case, of these apps. And I just think a general understanding, I mean, one of the frustrations is we're giving up far more information about our location to apps that are delivering far less social benefit than these contact tracing apps, but people really don't understand the trade-offs. And so they're wary in these cases, more so than perhaps in other cases where they should be more worried and there's less return.
How much of the blame for this lack of digital trust, then, should big tech take? Because, well, one of big tech is the world's largest social media company.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some issues with privacy. They know it. They're trying to work on it. They understand that there are these issues, and frankly, that's one of the reasons I think that Apple and Google got together and developed such a privacy-preserving contact tracing technology, so that they weren't keeping any information, they weren't giving any information to the government, and they were trying to protect us. And so they do. For sure, I think that they do bear some responsibility, and I think there is that understanding. But it's going to take I think a few years to work it out, to educate people, and to find the right balance between the services that we're all using and love versus the privacy that we want and expect.
This lack of uptake for contact tracing apps has given us a really stark demonstration of where digital trust is working to stop us adopting technologies that might help us, or probably would help us if enough of us did it. So in the future, as you say, if it takes a few years to fix, does this mean that this lack of trust is going to be a block on innovation, or going to inhibit growth in places where there is no trust in the digital environment?
I think so. I mean, I think that we distinguish between things that we know and we're comfortable with and we understand the benefits of. So, for instance, I think anyone, if they thought about it for a minute, would know that Uber has to know where you are to be able to send a car for you, and has to know where you go. But we're willing to make that trade-off, and even if our trust is dented, it probably not many people give up the benefits of Uber. But there's plenty of new technologies coming around that we clearly can live without because we've never used them. And I think there is kind of going forward, there is going to be some break on technology. I mean, people, I think, are, wary of these, smart speakers because they think they're listening in, or they might be willing to put one in their kitchen, but not in their bedroom. So I think that there is going to be some wariness, and it's going to come up with self-driving cars. It's going to come up with a lot of AI technologies where people think, well, I'm comfortable where I am, and I'm not going to try something new because I don't trust it and I don't see the benefits right now.
Well, a lot of behaviors that show a lack of digital trust, for example, putting a little bit of tape over your webcam, or, like you say, not putting a smart speaker in your bedroom, they become normal. They're not considered strange behaviors at all. So is digital trust broken forever? What's the worst case scenario if we do not establish digital trust?
Well, I think it's well demonstrated with this contact tracing app, that we're in the midst of this pandemic that's ground everything to a halt. This technology comes along. It's protecting privacy perhaps even more than it should to protect us. And we're not willing to use it. And we're sitting in our homes waiting for the vaccines when there is a technology that, if everyone adopted it, would significantly lower the transmission. So I think that it's not broken forever, but it is going to have some harms, and it's going to take some time till we come up with the right balance, and hopefully next time a little more comfort level with these apps.
Overall, Michael, are you an optimist or a pessimist? I see your book that's coming out is called The Flip Side of Free. How bad do you think that flip side is?
Well, I mean, I think we see it in the fact that people are starting to get more wary about the data that they're giving up in return for these free services. But overall, I'm an optimist. I've been doing a lot of work around the world on the benefits of these technologies, working with the World Bank and others to bring more internet to Africa and other regions. So I'm an optimist, and I think these things will work themselves out. And I think that the companies, the governments all have a recognition, and they're trying to find a new balance. So overall, I'm very optimistic.
Well, all eyes on these companies and all eyes on governments regarding digital trust at the moment. So let's see what happens. Michael, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you want to get deeper into this, read Michael's blog on the topic. It's called Why the Anti-Appers, and you'll find it at POC.eu. And he mentions in his blog the Centre for Digital Trust, very relevant. So the link to the centre is on the screen now. And finally, of course, we did briefly mention Michael's forthcoming book. It's called The Flip Side of Free, so check that out as well. Well, thanks for watching. You'll find lots more new research on the impact of COVID-19 and COVID economics. It's free, it's open access as ever at CEPR.org.